Okay, so after getting all the machinery from Steve Summers, I decided to go back and make him a channel gift. I was thinking about making him a design with his channel logo, but I ended up deciding to go with a rectangle sign to resemble like a brass machinery tag like you would find on, say, those Kearney Trecker horizontal mills that had those brass tags on them. So we're going to start out here in Fusion 360. Start out with a 2-point rectangle. We're going to come in and change our units over to millimeters since that's what I run my 3D prints in. So we're going to come over here. We're going to go with, I think my printer has like a 220 by 220 printing platform on X and Y. So I went roughly under at 210 millimeters, and then I think 60 will be fine. I think we might change it later to maybe 80 millimeters to fit the text better. So then from there we do an offset. So this will create the it'll create the outline, and we'll extrude that and make that raised off the surface. From there, we're going to place the text. We're going to put his name, then we're going to put his channel information as to what he does, his general channel description. So we're going to start out by creating a sketch line going from across to place the base of our text on. So we're going to set a dimension from the bottom. So we set the text to go on to the base of the line at the very bottom of the text. From there we copy and paste his general channel description: machining, welding, custom projects, reviews, build, repairs. And we're just checking out general spacing and everything, and with those slashes being so small, I don't think it'll pull up when we go to print it. It won't actually print because of the resolution. So I end up deleting those, and it gets everything spaced out better. As you'll see when we go to print this, some of the letters actually get little gaps in between them when it goes to print, and I should have made the text slightly bigger, but it still turns out very well. Okay, so we're going to go back. We're going to put another baseline for our text. And this is what we're going to put his and Steve Summers' name on. Now, it does end up taking me a second to find what text I like, and scroll through. I don't know. You get the correct text size and getting the font that I like, and it fits the placard well. almost positive this text right here, the previous one, was the one I ended up picking. But I ended up going through and looking to make sure there's not any ones that I like better. Yeah, as you could see with some of them, the spacing was off, or it's blurry, or it's just off. So we just set that dimension to where that looks right, where it's centered in between the top of the outline and that other piece of text. We then go back and we place the holes, which I end up mounting it on, which I end up changing from those side holes there, and I go up to the 4 separate ones. So here I just set some rough dimensions from the outline of the sketch perimeter, well, to the outside of the print. And, so I just stick 10mm on those, and then from that to the right and left sides of the print. So as you'll see here in a second when I change the orientation on this print, is I've got the raised outline and I've got the raised text around from the base of the actual print, and then obviously didn't have to go back and extrude the holes because I left that in the sketch. So you've got the two holes going all the way through, you've got the raised outline, you've got the two sections of raised text, and yeah, as you can see with some of those letters, they're kind of thin, so when that goes on the printer, there's some parts that end up, that don't end up printing for whatever reason because of how thin they are. So I could have enlarged that lower text that has the machining, welding, custom projects, reviews, and repairs on there. But otherwise it turned out quite well. So from here, we end up sticking this into our slicer, which as of recently I have swapped over to Prusa slicer over Cura, just for the fact that it has a better availability of options, but at the same time there's some things that you can and cannot do in Prusa as you can with Cura slicer. You know, like Cura, there's like over 1,400 different settings you can play around with, whereas in Prusa there's like, I don't know, 800 or so. I mean, so as long as you know the settings, I think it turns out quite well. But the thing that's different in Prusa is you can select custom supports and everything to build on certain sections, whereas you cannot do that in Cura, which I prefer that much more. I didn't particularly use any supports on this print, but on other prints that I've done since then, the print quality has been much better than what it was when I was doing Cura. Now I also went back and changed this sketch, and I added 2 more holes. And honestly, I could have went with smaller holes than 6mm because they're quite big. But I'm almost positive when I drew this up, I did it based on a 1032 screw. 1032 or 1024, can't remember. For those of you that don't know, I took the 3/16 as a decimal point. I multiplied it times 25.4 to get the metric conversion. From inches to millimeter. And then right here, as you can see, I'm just putting the rest of the sketch dimensions on those lower circles as I did with the top ones. So right there should be our finished print. We have our 4 mounting holes that are done to a 1032 or 3/16 screw. So then we have our raised text. We have that raised outline. And honestly, the thing looks pretty good. I like the text and everything. So, you know, I end up showing this in a few different views to get, you know, a better view of the text and everything. Then we'll be putting this into our slicer momentarily, going over settings. I end up printing this out of PLA, and you know, just using your common temperatures for that. I think I did 200 degrees for the filament temperature, and 50 or 60 degrees for the bed temperature. So here in a second, we end up just exporting this, and yeah, we'll get that moved into Cura. And And also recently I've started exporting stuff as either a 3MF or OBJ file because whatever reason with the STL files, when you go to print something, as you guys might have noticed when I did my logo, is that like on STL files they do like a faceted texture, and so instead of being a circle like it's supposed to be, ended up printing like basically a large faceted object instead of like a circle. So say an octagon versus a nice round circle. So we end up getting this exported, and then we put that into Cura. Yeah, so we end up slicing this. We get a rough estimate, and we're looking at 6 hours, 40 minutes. Probably give or take half an hour. I'm not sure as to why we ended up saving this immediately. I didn't go over settings or anything, unless I already had those preset. Yeah, so you can see like a better detail of how the text is raised here. You got the red as the walls and the yellow as the top surface. I think it's like either a 2 or 4 millimeter raised surface off the lower portion of the print. So here we kind of go over the location and sizing and everything. It's like, again, we'd slightly try to scale it up. Because originally when I had it in Fusion it was 210 millimeters. I scaled it up to 215. Just looking at the possibility with text issues. Let's see. Okay, so after scaling that up, we go to reslice it again. I think we should go over settings after this. Okay, so right here we can see what I'm talking about. So since that text is so small in the resolution, you can see there's gaps in between the letters, which I was trying to fix by scaling it up slightly, but it still didn't seem to fix that, and it's not very bad. Yeah, I wished the text was slightly bigger to where it would resolved that issue, but it still turned out a lot better than what I expected it to be. Although after taking this off the print bed, it did slightly warp, so I probably should have turned down my bed temperature just a little. Yeah, so one of the corners slightly picked up and it warped. But overall, it printed exceptionally well. Yeah, so as of right here, we have a 20% cubic infill. Now going over our settings. So in our print quality, we have a 2mm layer height. Our initial layer height is 0.2 millimeters. We have our line width. It's the same as the nozzle diameter at 0.4 millimeters, which is the same thing as the wall line width. So we have our wall thickness. That's going to put us at 2 layers on the perimeter. Then we're going to go to our top and bottom. So we have, it looks like to be 2 top and bottom. Well, it's going to put us at 4 top and bottom layers, which that is something I've changed most recently. I went to like 5 top layers and 7 bottom layers. So we have our infill density at 20%. We have our line distance at 6 millimeters and a cubic infill, which gets at the strong triangular pattern. So we're printing with PLA, so we got 200 degrees Celsius as our nozzle temperature, which is like 415 degrees Fahrenheit. And then we have our build plate temperature at 57 degrees, which probably could have been a lot lower, more around 43 to 45 degrees Celsius, which I think is like 80 or 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So just right below the glass transition temperature. Which is at the temperature that this particular filament will warp. So I should have set that temperature a little bit lower. So we have our print speed at 60 millimeters a second. But you still get a good print quality at that speed. So I normally print between 40 and 60 or so, and I really haven't went above that, due to vibrations and everything in the printer, just out of rigidity. So we have our retraction distance. So with PLA, it's not as stringy, so you go a little bit lower. So I have it as 6 millimeters of retraction distance at 40 millimeters a second. Well, it's like PTG, I'll go with 8 or 10 millimeters a second. 8 to 10 millimeters of length of retraction at like 50 to 60 millimeters a second. So we aren't doing any supports. That isn't any issue. So that blue line around the perimeter of our print is the brim. So we have that as a 250 millimeter minimum length. So that also helps with warping, as it'll dissipate that heat better when your print goes to cool down. So if it goes to cool down too fast, and you've got a variety in temperatures, so have a very high temperature and a low temperature, that's what ends up causing stuff to warp. So having a skirt or a brim around the perimeter of your print helps with that. So here we get into the time lapse of this printing. At the time, I think I recorded this on my phone. So it's pretty decent video footage. Yeah, I think this is done at 1080p at 240 frames a second. On like a, it's either 2 or 5 second interval when it ends up taking a picture. It is time lapse, and you can see on that front right hand corner is where that little corner picked up. So I should have had my temperature on the bed slightly cooler, but didn't end up warping too bad. Yeah, I think overall this thing took 7.5 hours to print, so it didn't do too bad. Yeah, so then after all this printed, I got it cleaned up. I ended up going back and painting it a bronze gold color to, resemble those bronze placards that are found on machinery. Just like the one that Steve Summers for his Kearney Trecker mill that he has hanging up in the shop. So that's why I decided to, resemble that with this sign.